Hello, I'm Brett Knowles from PM Squared Consulting. This video walks you through the emerging best practices around the gamification of business, and I want to provide you with some insights into what we're actually seeing in the client environments. So, first off, let's talk about the need. And the thing is this, people in your organization do not know a bunch of things. But before I go into that detail, I want to talk to you about people. The people in your organization, as far as we see, are of course the employees and their leadership. Those make sense. But you also need to consider the partners. There's a bunch of people that help you in value delivery, contracted employees, part-timers, and so on. They're partners in your business. And if they're not performing your strategy correctly, that reflects back on you as the organization. In addition, you have your suppliers, and again, they represent your brand, their ability to deliver the right quality at the right time, at the right location, impacts your overall value equation. And then finally, of course, investors and stakeholders. And each of these people should be aligned against your strategy or aligned to your strategy, but in most cases, they don't know. And they don't know a couple of things. They don't know what is their purpose in value creation. So as an employee, they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. In fact, in a recent survey, it seemed like less than 17% of employees can clearly define what is their purpose in the organization. And without your purpose, employees, of course, are demotivated, don't know what they're supposed to do, and probably are not doing the right things. The second thing they don't know is how to go about mastering that process and given the opportunity to develop themselves to master that. The third thing is the autonomy. People don't know how to get the autonomy to go get their job done. And then finally, the feedback, that information about are they making progress. These four things, purpose, mastery, and autonomy, are in fact the things that drive motivated employees. And if you want to learn more about that, read Daniel Pink's book, Drive, and he outlines those first elements for sure as being part of it. And these things are intrinsic rewards. They're not money, which is extrinsic, they're intrinsic. I control that and have access to that myself. And these are the things which make games so interesting. If I'm playing a game of chess, I understand the purpose. I keep practicing it till I master it. I have the opportunity of autonomy. I can play it myself. And finally, I can track how I'm progressing. And that's the same with any game, even online games in particular. So let's talk about an online game. And I'm going to use the example of Angry Birds, only because it's an easy game to explain. In Angry Birds, it's a simple activity. We have a slingshot, and you have the chance of flinging these birds towards this structure, which includes pigs. And in fact, when you pull this back, you can begin to get a trajectory of where it's going to go. So it's interesting. It has physics and speed and all sorts of fun things that people can learn about. But more importantly, it's a simple activity. And so now you understand the purpose. Clearly, the purpose is to try to destroy this pig house. And that's easy for anyone to understand. Secondly, we have the ability to master it. You can keep repeating this level until you've solved the puzzle. Now, what happens in the game, of course, is you have autonomy. You can keep on playing that game for as long as you want to develop your skill set and get better at it, to get the mastery. And of course, in this game, as most of them, you can even level up. So as you solve one puzzle, you have the choice of either trying to solve it more efficiently, mastering it, or moving up to the next level. So you can see here, this is a more complex structure, and I'm beginning to get different levels of birds and so forth. The net is, I'm leveling up. And we can apply these principles back to business as well. So the idea of purpose, making our employees' roles clear. Mastery, letting them develop the skills and giving them constant feedback as they're developing it. Leveling up, when they achieve a certain performance level or have accomplished a certain project in training, they get to take on a bigger project and so forth. And then feedback. We need to have constant progress reported back to the employee, or in this case, in the gaming environment. So as things happen, you get a bunch of real-time scores. You also understand the benchmark, how you're currently performing, and so forth. So it's magical how they've included these elements in, and that's what makes online gaming so addictive. those game mechanics can be applied back to our business worlds. What does that look like? Well, first off, we need to figure out in the business world, what is our purpose? And in fact, if we think of allocating points to people, we're going to allocate it back based on two things. One is, what is the strategic importance of the thing they're working on, and how much progress have they made? So if my strategy is about penetrating new markets, the activities I do towards that new market is more important than activities I'm doing against the same market or product development, for example. So as I identify those projects, I should be able to earn more points for the penetrate new markets ones than the other projects. And if I made the same amount of progress on both projects, the new markets one is going to give me more points. So in the business context, let's take a look at how this is done. Obviously, points are going to be calculated for your business unit based on the priority of what they're working on and performance. So let's set it up as a spreadsheet. We'll list the priority down the left. So in this case, we're going to use priority 1 of being critical, essential, expected, stretch, and unplanned. And then across the top, we're going to list performance. So again, we're going to grade our performance from red to green. Now, just to simplify things for a second, as far as I'm concerned, green means tickety-boo fine. We're working at or close to target. Yellow means we're not achieving our target, but we can do so with the resources you've provided. And red is send help. The expectations of this process are beyond what I can deliver based on the resources you've given me. So either give me more resources or change your expectations from this objective. But as things stand, I need extra resources to achieve that goal, and I have none of those under my disposal. Now, within those, we have subclassification. So critical, let's stop everything and meet on it right away. Send help. On our monthly meeting, we're going to have that conversation. I'm not performing very well, but with focused effort, I can get there. I'm getting progress towards my target. I'm bordering success, and I've met or exceeded target. Gives me the green. And the mathematics that we use is basically this. If I achieve my target, I get 100% of the points. If I border target, I get 75%, 50, and so forth. And then we have a point structure that looks a bit like this. So let's say I have a critical project and I meet expectations. I'd get 125 points. Now, this becomes easy for me to choose how I'm going to spend my time because if, for example, I had an essential project, I only get 100 points. And so I can begin to prioritize my time consistent with what management wants. So based on this strategic priority, I can make sure I'm focused on the right things and putting the right effort in. And so you can see that if I, at the end of the period, only get bordering success, I get 75% of these points, or 94. 50% is 63, and so forth. Now, I wish I could tell you there's a bunch of science behind this, but there isn't. There's just a whole bunch of experiments. We've done this time and time again and have learned this is an appropriate points distribution to inspire the average team and group. The other interesting thing that we've learned is this. When we add in an unplanned project into the scope, we don't allocate points. And this is a forcing function. Obviously, if your boss added in an unplanned project in this scheme, you're not going to spend any time on it until they help you decide what priority that unplanned project is. Let's say, for example, the worst case, that unplanned project they dumped on you is actually critical. Well, we believe there's a quota you should have of critical projects. Say no more than 10% should be critical, no more than 25% should be essential. Let's say 50% are expected, and so forth. So now if I add this extra unplanned activity into your critical bucket, you should be able to say to the boss, well, which of the existing critical ones do I now bump down to essential? Because I'm already at quota. I can't add in another one unless you give me more resources. If you're not giving more resources, something has to get bumped down. And the fair deal is the organization guides you towards which thing gets downgraded. It's unfair to ask you to make that decision because if you get it wrong, then of course, in hindsight, it's kind of your fault. So let's have that conversation and agree which one gets bumped down. Now maybe you've hit your quota on essentials, so something else gets bumped down to expected. and so forth. So the idea is this is an agreement, a service level agreement between you or your team and the organization, and it guides how people are going to perform. So in this way, we can easily prioritize ourselves and figure out what things we should be working on to keep the organization happy. So that point structure, if I add it up across the mix of projects and processes your team works on, gives me a dashboard that looks like this. So let me give you a quick tour of this dashboard. Overall, we can see that we're looking at the marketing department, and this sample database is for the third quarter of 2015. In this particular game, we have a forecast of 861 points, and they've actually so far achieved 775. I'm going to talk about this scoring for a second. The way that we structure this in this environment is for any one team, we're going to take a look at the objectives or processes and projects they're working on and add up how many points they could earn based on priority. And whatever that number is, let's say it's 670, we then normalize that up to 1,000. So all the teams start off with a possibility of earning 1,000 points. So if you look at this graph here, you can see that as the period unfolds, the forecast stays at 1,000, and then something happens. Maybe we have a supplier problem, a customer goes bankrupt, whatever it might be, and we adjust our overall forecast where we expect to perform. In this case, you can see how it's degraded. Now, the idea is that we want the whole organization to know what's happening, and if I'm not going to launch that project on time, for example, I want everyone to know so that they're not depending on it. And then at the same time, we report actual performance, and we can see how that trends up towards that green area, which we call the success zone. So we don't expect any teams to end up at 1,000 points. Something always happens, and we should see the progress going up. In this case, we can see how the marketing team is performing. But if I wanted to take a look at all the teams, I could see that all the teams are roughly making progress at the same time, engineering, marketing, and so forth. So now if I go back up here, we can see that of the 1,000 they're initially expecting to get, it's degraded down to 861, and they so far got 775. We can also see how many red, yellow, and green measures they have, either by their status or by this priority. So in this case, we've got 5 critical projects or objectives that are green, 7 essential, and so forth. So we can see the priority in the mix of scores. In this area, I can begin to see how the rest of the team is performing. So there's us, marketing, with our forecast and actual. And here are all the other teams that are part of the organization. And we can see, for example, operations is falling short currently. We can also see how well we're aligned to strategy. So are our focus consistent with the corporate level? The corporate levels are silver, ours are blue in our team, so we can see we're basically aligned. Over here, we can see the leaderboard. So, marketing right now is in second place and so on. And this is just based on how many points they've earned and how many badges we have. So this is the dashboard. This allows us to apply those game mechanics to business, because now I can see on an ongoing basis how we're performing and what our expectations are. Now, if we want, we can go in a bit more detail. I can take a look at the scorecard, which details out the specific objectives that we've identified, comments about status, red, yellow, green, do we need a discussion, who owns them, and so forth. So the net is, this is our scorecard for the organization that brings forward all these concepts from the gaming world and apply those game mechanics to the business world. So let's take an example. For most businesses, we find that what we call a game is typically a quarter long. And a quarter has 3 periods in it each month. And so we think of a game as being a quarter, and each period in the game is being a month long. So let's talk about a great sport, a great game that has 3 periods, ice hockey. Now, what happens in ice hockey is when you're out there on your shift, you're busy playing hard, and eventually you get off the ice and you have a quick chat with your teammates and the coach and so on, talking about what you observed on that shift and what you might do on the next shift. Those are analogous to your weekly or daily production meetings, where we're just talking about what we're immediately seeing and taking short-term decisions. And then you go back on the ice and you play again, and you have another conversation when you get back. Again, the daily, weekly activities. Now, at the end of a period in a hockey game, you go off the ice and you have a flip chart session with the boss. So think of that in the office at the month end, we should have a flip chart session where we have a bigger conversation about strategy. We share what our observations are from the management side, and we share the observations from what's happening on the ice. And you might make changes to the shifts and timing. You might discover what shift on their team has a weak side on the left and so forth. And you come up with a strategy and you go off and play the next period. You come back and you have another meeting with management. So that organization has 4 learning cycles or 3 learning cycles in the same time that you have none. And the idea is we're still keeping scores, but the scores are getting more and more complicated. We talk about not just how many goals we have, but shots on net, shots saved, how many times you're forechecking and back-checking and so forth. A bunch of different statistics, which allows us to continually improve how we're performing. And we're seeing in business a trend away from using data and facts and towards self-reporting. So in the game of hockey, we have referees and scorekeepers who keep score for us. And that's analogous to what we do in the business world right now with data warehouses and business intelligence. But think of another sport. Think of golf. In golf, it's self-reporting. There's no referee that goes with you. And there's a lot of mystique and culture about how it is we report performance in the golf game. We're seeing organizations moving towards self-reporting. You're going to use a mix of different reports and spreadsheets and stuff that you currently look at to come up with a statement about how you think you're performing, red, yellow, and green. And that overall performance is then going to be reflected on your scorecard and have it as part of the conversation. Now, if you cheat on golf, you're only cheating on yourself. On work, of course, if you cheat on your score, you're cheating on your teammates, and they'll find out about it by month end or quarter end if you've been saying everything is green and it turns out that's not the case. In fact, what we've discovered is in organizations where we have self-reporting, they actually have more accurate performance reporting than before. Why? Because I'm paying attention to the data now, as opposed to before when it was just dumped in. I didn't really take a look at it. And I'm conscious that my teammates are going to assess my ability to evaluate how we're performing. So I have better ownership of those measures. Of course, at the end of the game, we're still going to celebrate our successes, but then we're going to reset because the game's over, but not the series. We now need to go out and play the next quarter or the next game. And in fact, we find that it takes most organizations about 3 games to actually be more accurate in their forecasting because up till now you haven't had that accurate feedback. So that's the application of game mechanics to business. What it delivers for us is a bunch of things. First off, it delivers employee engagement. Why? Well, because we now understand what we're supposed to do. We understand our purpose. We can master it. We have the autonomy to get it done, and we have the feedback. And so we see things like reduced turnover. We see way higher productivity from employees, not only because they're more engaged, but because they've stopped doing the wasteful activities that didn't lead to success. And therefore, there's knock-on consequences like significantly higher customer satisfaction. We also see a change in how we do that annual performance review. Right now in the annual performance review, we all know it's broken. You're not giving an accurate rendition of how we've been working all year long. Whereas now, of course, you have all the information month on month. And if the strategy changes, again, the score points change, and therefore I continue to earn points against that new strategy. In fact, if I keep doing the old strategy, I don't get as much points because the structure has changed. And so what we're seeing is way better performance because of the role clarity. I now understand what my purpose is and the specific metrics behind it. Secondly, I have more frequent but less formal performance conversations. Every single month I talk to my boss about performance. In fact, we see people managing up. They say to the boss things like, I've got 200 points I can't get because you keep on delaying my training. So either rethink my objectives or allow me to go off and take that training. And then finally, we can self-manage our careers. We can see where we're gaining points and where our strengths are and coach ourselves on how to perform better, just like you coach yourself playing a sports game. We see the organizations have way better agility. Why? Because I have earlier warning about problems as that forecast begins to degrade. I know what's happening. Secondly, I can react to it faster. If you have a problem even in the middle of a period, you can get together, readjust the points, and the team will move in that new direction almost instantly. And finally, we have collective learning. We can see what's happening across the organization, and we can all move together on solving that problem. What we also see is more disciplined thinking. The fact of taking the strategic goal and breaking it down to objectives means that we begin to discover a clear relationship between the strategic priorities and the actions we take, be they processes or projects. We are able to give way better feedback and therefore learning cycles and have better thinking for the next game. And finally, we get way better alignment. We're all pulling in the same direction because we have agreement on the objectives and what we need to do to get there. Now, there are many organizations out there that have been applying these gamification ideas to great success. And every day there's more case studies on those successes. So what are your next steps? Well, to learn more, read Daniel Pink's Drive book, which I talked about before. There's another great book by Mario about gamification at work. And I've been frequently publishing YouTubes and LinkedIn postings that describe aspects of what we've just talked about today in more detail. So just search for Brett Knowles on YouTube. Or just pilot in your organization. It only takes about 3 days to set up that dashboard that I showed you because you have the strategy and the processes and the measures. We just have to bundle it together. And what we've learned is 100% of the customers that build this pilot move on to rolling this out across the organization because of such significant benefits. So I hope this has been useful to you. By all means, feel free to contact me by email or phone. As you can tell, I'm passionate about this and more than happy to help your organization move forward.